And today I'm going to be talking about how the addition of AI assistants into our end-to-end encrypting messaging apps is possibly a security concern that we should all be aware of. So, as I mentioned, my name is Lauren. I work at Cisco Foundation AI right now. It was formerly a company called Robust Intelligence. It was acquired by Cisco. I've also worked for Splunk and the University of Utah. I'm sorry to my BYU fans. I know I'm in Provo. I went to school at Utah State University for both my undergrad and my master's, and I live in Utah. This is my first time ever speaking at a conference, so you all get to join me for this. Thank you. So, this is the main point that I'm going to try and make to all of you today, is that AI assistants are breaking the assumptions behind encrypted communication. To stay secure, we must rethink end-to-end encryption models, not abandon them. So we're going to see how I do in the next 25 minutes, and then we can circle back and see if I change your opinions, if your opinions stay the same, or if you don't have an opinion at all. So a little bit about what I'm going to be covering today, just the history and the purpose of end-to-end encryption, the structure of a traditional end-to-end encryption messaging app. Don't worry, I won't bore you all to death on that part. Then what happens once we add in an AI assistant and how that changes the traditional structure. Then what the risk of adding in this assistant is. Some of the case studies that we're already seeing with this relatively new issue, and then some suggestions of where do we go from here now that we know this information. So encryption is nothing new. As security-focused individuals such as yourselves, I'm sure I'm not giving you revelation with this information, but this isn't actually an ancient practice. It goes all the way back to ancient hieroglyphs on the caves, then jumping way forward to World War II. The Germans used the World War II Enigma machine in order to keep their war efforts secret. And then as we move into more of the digital age in the 1970s and the 1980s, we have the development of what a lot of us are more familiar with. So this is the modern public key encryption, including RSA, which I would say is a very well-known encryption technique. Then in the 1990s, we have pretty good privacy and early email encryption. And this kind of was the first time that just average people could use encryption. It wasn't just for the military or for the government. There were some government concerns about just regular individuals such as ourselves having access to this privacy tactic, but it's just become more widely adopted since then. In the 2000s, we have the Internet Engineering Task Force standards, which were released, and then also the transport layer security, and then just general wider adoption. And that kind of drops us into where we are today. I know I'm a user of Signal pretty much on the daily, as well as I also use iMessage for just chatting for regular conversations. And most people, billions of people, are using end-to-end encryption apps, even if they don't even realize what that is or that they are using it. So this is a great thing that all of us are using. But just to kind of explain how it works, which I'm sure a lot of you would already know, but I'd rather say it than just assume you know. So in the first step, we have encryption. So this is where my plain text message or our plain text is scrambled using ciphertext. So now it's just kind of jumbled nonsense. It stays in this jumbled nonsense throughout the transmission stage. So it is unable to be read by anybody in the middle. This means the government, this means the app provider, anybody in the middle. Then once it goes to the intended recipient, it is decrypted. And then that's when it's restored into that original plain text. Lastly, there's the authentication. So there is a digital signature to confirm that the message that I sent to you was actually that message and you are actually the intended recipient. So a little bit about how this works in more of a graphic sense. So if I'm user A, my message is encrypted. It stays encrypted throughout this message service platform. At no point does this encryption break until it reaches user B. If both of the public keys, so there needs to be their private key to basically unlock it. So think of it I have a secret message, I put it in a box with my key, I lock that box. Then I send it in the mail. The postman can't unlock this box at any point in time until my friend, user B, unlocks this box with his key. So there are a lot of perks to using end-to-end encryption, whether you realize that you're using it or not. So there can be protection from third-party surveillance. So this can include governments or other governments. Any sort of like adversarial groups can't use the surveillance on you. Then there's also like what a lot of us are focused on, data security and privacy, making sure that like what you're saying to your friends, your family, your coworkers stays secret. Then lastly, but it also improves compliance management. So if you are, like the head of an organization and you have your workers using end-to-end encryption, that helps make sure that you aren't like subject to a breach through that. And then lastly, it's resistance to tampering. As I said, you want to make sure that what you sent is actually what you intended to send and nothing else. It doesn't get messed with along the way. So if you haven't been listening up to this point, I understand this is the main takeaway. End-to-end encryption is a type of messaging that keeps messages private from everyone, including the messaging service. Okay, so now we're adding in AI like we have into everything. So I found these kind of funny pictures on Twitter of what happens when, like, specifically AI is added into like iMessage. So like this one on the bottom was actually a screenshot that I found where it was like the personal trainer almost killed me with that workout. It says, trainer allegedly killed, needs to go to the hospital. Like, so obviously this is some new technology that we've got going on, right? Like it's not perfect. And so we have a ways to go. And like, I don't know, like these are just some examples that I found, but I don't know if you have ever like gotten these summarizations on like iMessage or whatever you use, but sometimes they're a little ridiculous. Okay, so now with the power of AI, let's add AI into it like we are with everything. So what can an AI assistant do? It can generate the message responses. So that means like instead of not just like the next word, I mean entire text messages to people. It can also summarize conversations and documents. So like if somebody is sending me a series of texts, maybe 10 text messages, it can like kind of condense those into like maybe a 1 or 2 word summary. It can also add in writing enhancements. So I know like specifically Apple Intelligence, there's like the writing tools feature, if any of you have used that, where it can basically tell you how to write your text better or how to like make your tone better and things like that. So think back to that original model that I sent you and the what I said with like the postman. So now me as the sender, I'm sending my message. Okay, but now that message is sent to the AI processing cloud. So then it is decrypted for that processing. So then it is able to generate those replies or generate those summaries. So instead of it just being me to the messaging service platform to user B, there's this middleman here. And that's kind of a cause for concern in my eyes, because in order for the AI to conduct its job of creating a summary or creating a response, it would need to know what the original plain text was. It needs context in order to perform its duty. So this kind of created some questions for me that I started, like kind of trying to go down the rabbit hole to see exactly what was going on. So as I said, AI assistants need context, and context requires plain text. So that graph that I just showed you shows you when my message leaves me and then it goes to the AI processing platform in the cloud. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes this AI processing is done on device. There is less exposure there because it stays like with you. So if it's done locally on that on-device model, that is a safer option. In the cloud, if it's sent to that external API for processing, there's like exposure there, right? So like during that transportation phase, like there's exposure there. And then also once it reaches that API endpoint, that's another weak point that we need to consider. So that AI analyzes the content and then it can, generate the summaries or the predictions and the smart replies. It can also temporarily store the information that it reads through our messages in order to have context or for like the rest of the conversation. Meaning like if this is an ongoing text exchange, it will remember the text earlier in the conversation so that it can keep its replies like on path. So some of the things that I was thinking of and like some of the questions and implications that came up for me is this is a new exposure point that like as defenders we need to be aware of, because now this plain text exists outside of the encryption boundary that like was the whole point of end-to-end encryption in my mind. So now hypothetically somebody could just breach into the AI infrastructure and that could expose lots of sensitive data without even breaking the original cryptography. This is also an expanded attack surface that we need to be aware of, because each one of these API endpoints is another area that like attackers could go to. So instead of having to break crypto, which is like impossible, they could just go to this new exposure point where millions or billions of people's information is being stored. Another couple of things that came up for me is the lawful access and compliance risks. So like as this is such an emerging like issue, there isn't really any sort of like compliance regulations on it so far. But like instead of just going to try and like get the information from anywhere else, could they just get it from the AI providers now? Like that's something that we should consider, like if it's not protected. Another concern is silent exfiltration. So there could be unauthorized extraction of this plain text information, like without anybody ever even realizing that like this AI assistant is spitting out sensitive information. I mean, as somebody who like works with AI and like I do like AI research, like it is such a new field, but like AI is kind of easy to trick in some ways. I mean, if you were here for the talk before, like if you feed it a malicious prompt, it may inadvertently cause the model to output sensitive content. It doesn't always have to be a malicious prompt. So another thing is indirect leakage. So like models work by getting trained. Like they get better and better by the more that we interact with them and the data that we feed them. So if we're feeding them billions of text messages, can they use those text messages as data to train themselves? That's another way that they could be accidentally revealing sensitive content. So the first like proof of this being an issue was something called Echo Leak. So it happened this summer. There's a research group called AIM Labs, and I'm sure a lot of you heard about this if you're like up with the cybersecurity news, but AIM Labs described it as the first weaponizable zero-click attack chain on an AI agent, resulting in the complete compromise of Copilot data integrity. So what this was Microsoft Copilot, which is added into like Microsoft like Outlook. It, if you could craft an email, that email prompt would trigger Microsoft Copilot's assistant to accidentally or intentionally exfiltrate the contents to an attacker-controlled endpoint. So Microsoft Copilot has the capability to scan documents and long emails. And like, how many people's organizations are using Microsoft Copilot? A lot. And so like, I know mine, you know, like if it's reading sensitive documents that are going through our email, all of a sudden those documents were leaked. So the impact was that attackers could access these plain text that the AI had permission to read, and then it was given to the attackers, all without breaking crypto. The next one, this was also pretty new. It was the McDonald's Olivia. So McDonald's Corporation was using an AI chatbot during the job interview process, like to screen job applicants. So researchers found that this McDonald's Olivia bot, the admin panel was publicly accessible and could be accessed using, get this, admin and then password 123456. So once they could log in, there were millions of people's sensitive data on there, including chat logs, all of their resumes, their names, their emails, all of their personal information. So this is just proof to show that AI is a weak point. Why would I bother, hacking into McDonald's when I could just go to this AI backend? Okay, so if we're talking about where do we go from here, or like what are some things that we should all be thinking about? So the first thing would be transparency. So we should all know if the data that is being processed either in the cloud or it's being processed locally on device. Like I said, locally on device is less exposure. Then the next thing would be like an opt-in feature instead of opting out. So I think it is fair to say that if you aren't aware of the risk, then these features should be off by default and people can opt into them, which a lot of people would probably opt in anyways. Like, as we all know, like, people just click yes, but I mean, it is a nice thought. Then the updated definitions of end-to-end encryption. If companies are using an AI processing tool, they need to say so, because that does change the endpoint. It is no longer user A to user B, is user A to AI to user B. So that should be disclosed. And then the next consideration that should be made is, if I'm in a group chat with myself and then 5 of my closest coworkers, and all of us have the features off, could one person have it on, and then that still exposes the rest of our data? Like, that's something that we should also consider. Like, is that fair?
Yeah.
Then some of the next steps for protecting privacy is, ideally, this like AI processing would happen without ever needing the decryption. Like, it would just, like, the information would stay encrypted. So, excuse me while I try to pronounce this, the homophoric encryption. So this would enable like model interference in the cloud while everything remains encrypted. Then the next thing would be a trusted execution environment. So any sort of sensitive like AI computation, so like if something is done that, like if this AI processing happens, it would be done in a separate area away from the main like device operating system, in order to like, avoid any sort of like weak points within it. Then the next thing would be a hybrid or split model. So if there is like a sensitive AI computation that needs to be done, it would be done on device, and then what's not sensitive could be done up in the cloud with that API endpoint. So some of the things that I want to think about, or have you all think about, like I asked at the beginning, if you wanted to check back in. So some of the key takeaways: adding AI assistants, in order for them to perform their duty of summarizing our text, of generating the response, it changes the rules. This plain text exposure throughout the API processing cloud is a new attack surface that we need to be aware of. This problem is already happening, as I showed you with Echo Leak, and I just see it snowballing into something worse. And so that's something that we should all be aware of. Our privacy must evolve with technology. I am not anti-AI. I'm not saying that we need to get rid of it, nothing like that. But I'm just saying, as we've added in this technology, we need to add, evolve our privacy. Like, as technology gets better, shouldn't our privacy? Then, I just think we need to build it responsibly. A lot of companies have been adding AI, left and right into things without fully fleshing things out of how it could change issues, or how it could change. So we need to be building it responsibly. I want to thank you all today and for coming to my first talk. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me, or I'm also on LinkedIn there. I do actually have time for a couple of questions if anybody has any. Yes.
Here, how many did they deliver the Microsoft Zero?
AIM Labs actually came out with a full report. I'd be happy to share it with you afterwards, if you'd like. They did a nice full case study on it. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. It was nice getting to talk to everybody. Thank you.
It's